talking a little bit how to get media coverage. So this is related to controversy. The best way to get media coverage is to either pitch a trend story that is new or to pitch a controversial element that is related to something that is going on right now. A lot of businesses use PR and use media as a form of marketing, and controversy is one of the most effective ways to get a reporter to pay attention to you. Because if you're not at least somewhat controversial or not on the front of a trend that just appears to be starting, they're probably going to write about someone else. And in terms of the actual strategy you use to get attention, media may not be one of those things that you choose to do. A lot of businesses actually try not to get covered by the media for the reason that more attention to the opportunity that exists in their industry invites competition and doesn't really help from a prospect standpoint. Also, some forms of business, even if you do get the media, that isn't going to be as effective as other things that you could do. About a month ago, I was in the style section of the New York Times, front page article, prominently displayed with my book and my website and everything, and as far as I could tell, very few book sales resulted. It may not be as effective as you'd think, but it's one of those things to test. So when pitching media, the controversy element of the book was very, very helpful in getting a reporter's attention and encouraging them to write about it. So, welcome to sales. So to ground ourselves again in where we are in the business process, we have already talked about how to create something of value, right? How to come up with an idea, how to make a prototype or a minimum viable offer, how to test it, how to improve it over time, and how to ultimately start selling it to customers. We talked about how to market that offer, so how to get attention, how to make people interested, and at the end of that process, we have a prospect, somebody who has raised their hands and said, yes, tell me more about this thing, I am interested in it. So sales is what we do when we have a prospect, right? So somebody has said, I'm interested. Sales is the process of taking that person who is interested in what you have and encouraging them to trust you enough to actually pull out their wallet or checkbook or credit card and say, I'll take one and give you money. So sales is the process of transforming a prospect into a paying customer. That's the end result. And sales, as far as business is concerned, is particularly important because it is the only point in the 5 parts of every business where your business is actually bringing in money. So when you're creating value, you're spending money. When you're marketing, you're spending money. When you're delivering the value you promised, you're spending money. And the people who are doing your financial analysis cost money. Sales is the only point in the business process where money actually enters the business. So it's particularly important. If you don't have sales, you have a hobby. You don't have a business. So the very best businesses are the businesses that are able to take the prospects that enter the business and convince them to trust the business enough to spend money with them. It's kind of the definition of an effective sales process.
Sales. Questions for reflection. How many sales are you making right now? Are you consistently asking for the sale? How can you prove you're trustworthy?
Now, the defining moment in the sales process is called a transaction. And a transaction is very simple. It's just an exchange of value between 2 or more parties. So I have something that you want, you have something that I want, we agree to trade, and we both feel that we're better off because we have traded. So it's a voluntary mutual exchange of value for mutual benefit. And you can only transact with things that are economically valuable, which we talked about in the value creation process, right? There has to be something that has perceived value for me in the transaction, whether that is money, whether that is resources, whether that is access, doesn't matter what it is. There has to be something economically valuable for me in the transaction, and there has to be something economically valuable for you in the transaction. So the goal of the sales process, particularly when you're starting a business, is to, as we talked about, a minimum economically viable offer, create something as quickly as possible that allows you to get to the point of a transaction with a real customer first. Because if you can't get to that point, if you can't get to the point of having a transaction with a real paying customer, you're in deep trouble. So a large part of starting and validating a business is creating something minimal and getting to the transaction point as quickly as possible. And once you get to the transaction point, preferably multiple times with at least 10 people, then you continue to improve the process to make it more fluid, to make it more solid, to make sure it happens over and over and over again. But getting to the first transaction is the point of the minimum economically viable offer. There's a lot of, and this is actually a recent trend with a lot of software startups, where they will create a system and they want to make sure that system can handle tens of millions of transactions from the outset, but nobody knows they exist and nobody is coming to their website. So that's cart before the horse. You need to make sure that people are actually finding your system valuable, and then you start talking about the systems in the process to make sure that thing happens over and over and over again. In the early phases of particularly a startup company, is just what are you offering? Can you get to the point where you have a transaction that is successfully delivered? And then you start looking for ways to be able to repeat that.
And in your example, it's 10 individual transactions, almost regardless of scale. So
yes.
If you're selling individual units that are a set of 5 individual units, it doesn't matter if you sell a set of 5 or a set of 50.
Exactly.
Each one of those
times 10
counts as 1.
Yes.
Right?
And what you learn in those first 10 transactions are the types of systems that you may need to build in order to make sure that happens over and over again. And there's a lot that you learn through the process of completing a transaction that you're not going to know before you go through that process. We're going to be talking about systems in great detail. But the general principle is the first systems that you're building to create the value to market and to sell, the point of building those systems is to get to the transaction part as quickly as possible, because once you go through a couple transactions, you'll learn even more about the types of systems you need to build to make that happen over and over again.
So plan to do 10 transactions and then be ready to react.
Exactly.
Or not.
Exactly. Or be prepared to say, this is not a great idea, I should go do something else.
Right.
Transaction. Questions for reflection. How many transactions are you completing each day? Are you offering anything that's not economically valuable? If so, what could you change or test to complete more transactions?
In thinking about the sales process, it helps to understand the conditions under which a transaction is typically made. So what has to be there? What has to be true in order for a customer to look at what you have to offer and say, yeah, that's great, I'll take one. I'll give you money for it. The very first of those preconditions is trust. If your customer does not trust that you have the ability or the willingness to actually deliver the benefits that you are promising them, they're never going to buy from you. So it doesn't matter how beneficial your offer promises to be. If they don't trust you or they don't trust the salesperson who is responsible for the transaction taking place, they're never, ever, ever going to buy. So sales is very much the process of building trust with the prospective customer. Because interest and trust are two very different things. You can hear about something promising and want to have more information about it. But if you don't trust the other party to ultimately deliver the benefit, they're never going to transact with you. So a lot of the things that we're going to talk about in the sales process are ways to build trust with your prospects. Now, sometimes, if you're very intelligent about your marketing and the way that you talk with a prospect, that impacts your reputation, which we talked about. The stronger your reputation, the better starting point you have in terms of people trusting you. So you can kind of go into a transaction with points already in your favor. So that's why a reputation is a benefit. But the rest of the sales process is a process of building trust with the prospect so they ultimately will go through a transaction. Now, the other thing too, in terms of thinking about different types of transactions, some transactions are pretty huge. For example, take a common situation like buying a house or buying a company, where there may be hundreds or millions of dollars at stake. And there may be a legitimate question of, can you hold up your end of the bargain? Do you have enough money to buy this business? Do you have enough money to buy this house? Whatever. There are opportunities in business that revolve around increasing the amount of trust between parties. So a good example of this is an escrow service. So instead of you trusting my statement that I have $1 million in my bank account right now, I can deposit $1 million into an escrow account and you can see it. And just by virtue of seeing it, you can trust that I have the ability to go through on this transaction. So there are a lot of external systems that you can think about to increase the trust that either the customer has for you or the trust that you would be able to deliver upon your end of the bargain.
Trust. Questions for reflection. How much do your potential customers trust you right now? What can you do to demonstrate that you're trustworthy? Do you need to verify your customers will keep their promises before you sell to them?
Now, another precondition for a transaction taking place is called common ground, which is a term that comes from negotiation. A lot of the things that we are going to be talking about in the sales process are fundamentally negotiation ideas. So common ground is a state of overlapping interests between two or more parties. So we said earlier, I have something you want, you have something I want, we can exchange and we're both better off because of it. That is a statement of common ground. There is some future world in which we transact, and you are happy because of it, and I am happy because of it. And a lot of what negotiation is exploring all of the potential things that would be a good thing for me, and all of the things that would be a good thing for you, and seeing if there's some area of overlap between the two. So visually, you can kind of think of all of your available options as like a circle surrounding you and a circle surrounding the other party. There has to be some situation where those circles overlap, and you can both take an action that's beneficial, or nothing's going to occur. So the first part of sales and the first part of negotiation is really doing that exploratory process. What are all of those things that would be good for you, and what are all those things that would be good for me, and is there some option that would be good for both of us? That's really the start of the negotiation. And negotiation is basically just exploring all the paths that we could potentially get to a transaction. But if you never hit this idea of common ground, a sale is never going to take place.
Common ground. Questions for reflection. How much common ground do you have with the party you're negotiating with? What do they currently desire, and how can you help them get what they want? What potential options could you explore?
Now we get into a very fun area called pricing. And pricing is interesting, as we've talked about a little bit earlier, in that pricing is a deeply psychological thing. So unlike going into your local supermarket, most of the things in this world do not have a non-negotiable price tag attached to them. There is no such thing as an objective price for anything. It's always a matter of the perceived value, as we talked about earlier. So one of the first counterintuitive things to understand about pricing is what I call the pricing uncertainty principle. And the pricing uncertainty principle says that all prices are arbitrary and malleable. It's an executive decision. You set the price without limit. You can change it anytime. If you want to go outside and pick up a rock from the ground and say the price for this rock is $4 trillion, you can do that. There's nobody stopping you. Now, whether or not anybody is going to give you $4 trillion for this rock is another question. But in terms of setting the price, you can do whatever you want, which is very freeing when you actually internalize that idea. The key when you set a price on anything, whether it's a house, whether it's a car that you're selling, whether it's a business that you've created and now want to sell, the key when you're setting a price on anything is to think about the price that you can support. So if I say this rock is worth $4 trillion, I have to be able to prove to someone that it is indeed worth $4 trillion before a transaction is ever going to take place, right? So you can set any price that you want, but you have to prove that your price is accurate and that that price would be attractive to somebody else. So in general, people don't want to pay any more than they have to or feel is justified. So a large part of proving or convincing is whatever you are paying for this particular item, you are going to get far more in terms of value and benefits to yourself as a result of the transaction. That's why people buy things. They value the thing more than they value the money. So you can set any price that you want, but you have to support the prices that you set.
The pricing uncertainty principle. Questions for reflection. Have you considered the full range of possible prices for your offer? What would happen if you cut your price in half or doubled the price? What if you increased the price by 10 times or more?
Now, how do you go about setting a price, or how do you go about supporting the prices that you set? And this is another very useful mini checklist called the 4 pricing methods. And so there are 4 ways to support a price. And the 4 very quickly are replacement cost, market comparison, discounted cash flow or net present value, and value comparison. So replacement cost is a way to answer the question, how much would it cost to replace? So let's say you're trying to sell a house. Houses don't come with price tags. You have to set the price yourself. And so one way of kind of triangulating into what a supportable price would be is imagine hypothetically that one night a meteor came down, smashed into your house, and there is nothing left. Total obliteration. No house there anymore. What would it cost you to buy a similar piece of land, to pay an architect, to have somebody build the exact same house, down to all the materials and all the finishings and everything, from the ground up? That price, plus a little margin for the builder and all the people you would have to pay to do that, is the price, the cost of that house, the replacement cost. So if you know the replacement cost of something, how much it costs to actually create in the first place, you can say, okay, this is how much this thing is probably worth within an order of magnitude. Now, market comparison, continue with the house example. Fortunately, meteors don't obliterate houses very often. So most of the time, prices on houses are set by comparing the house that is being sold versus other houses that are pretty much the same in the same general area that have already sold recently, right? So you can say 2 months ago, a house 2 doors down sold for $600,000, has the same number of bedrooms, has the same number of bathrooms, has the same general level of finishing. This house is worth $600,000. So market comparison method is actually a very common method of setting prices in business. If my competitor, who is selling this particular chemical, is selling it for $8 a pound, then starting at $8 a pound is probably not a bad place to start. And you may be able to move a little higher or a little lower, but that's the right order of magnitude. So you're just finding a similar offer in the marketplace that already exists to yours, and you set your price a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but around that same order of magnitude. Now, discounted cash flow, or net present value method, answers the question, how much is it worth if it can bring in money over time? And this is the general idea, continuing with the house example, of let's say I didn't sell the house, let's say I rented it. How much could I rent it for? And you can do a kind of market comparison on what houses in this area are generally rented for. Think of that rent payment. Every month you're getting a check. And you would probably be able to get that check for at least a year if you set up a contract to do that. There's a formula that you can use, and we're not going to go into it now. It's pretty straightforward. You can look it up on Wikipedia. It's called the discounted cash flow method, which is basically if you have a series of payments that's coming in over a particular amount of time, and you account for all of the other ways that you could use your money, you can back out to what is that series of cash flows worth to me now if it was paid to me upfront right now. So you can take this series of rent payments and say, okay, over this period of time, given all the other things I could do with my money, that series of payments is worth X to me right now, and X is a price. But you can't really use this method unless you have something that is capable of generating a series of payments. So our $4 trillion rock example, no series of payments, so we can't do this. The last of the 4 pricing methods is called the value comparison method. And the value comparison method answers the question, who is this valuable to? So let's say there's a house in Kentucky, and if you look at comparable houses in the neighborhood, similar number of bedrooms, similar number of bathrooms, relatively indistinct, the price on that house may be a couple $100,000 based on the market. Let's add one more variable, which is this house was originally owned by Elvis Presley. What happens to the value? Shoots up. Why?
Because everybody wants to go, I live in a house Elvis Presley lived in.
Exactly. Elvis has a lot of fans. That element of the house, even though market comparison-wise, it may be absolutely indistinguishable from any of the houses in the neighborhood, just the fact that it's more valuable to people who love Elvis Presley will shoot the price up. And will shoot it up in a supportable way, because there's more than one person in the world that loves Elvis Presley. So the value comparison method is a way of looking at what you have and saying, who is this particularly valuable to, and why is it valuable to them? And you can set a price and you can sell against the unique aspects of your offer that are more valuable to some people than others. So of the 4 pricing methods, you're typically going to get the highest supportable price if there's some uniquely valuable thing about what you do. And you target that value against the type of person who is going to be very interested in that unique characteristic. Anybody think of an example of value-based pricing at work? Auctions. How so?
Well, depending on exactly what it is, you get the social factor. People get excited, they want to bid, they want it, they want it, they want it.
Yeah.
So,
Auctions are actually a really great example because it's a sale that takes place, and at the beginning of the sale, there's no fixed price set to it, right? They may start with a minimum, so a price at which the seller is not willing to part with the item. But from the minimum, the price becomes a negotiation between people who value the item more and more and more and more because they value it to that point. And auctions are a particularly efficient method of setting a high price when the value of the item is originally unknown. The value is ultimately how much somebody is willing to pay for it. And when people bid against each other saying, I would be willing to pay more, and I would be willing to pay more, and I would be willing to pay more, the price goes up and up and up and up until the bidders get to the point it's like, I'm not willing to pay any more for that. And the price is set, and the transaction is made. So yeah, that's a great example of both a little bit of market comparison as well as value comparison.
People often pay more for handmade items.
Yes, why?
The sense that there's a person who's put specific time into it. There's an emotional connection.
Yes.
Or something that's made by a widow in Africa.
Uh-huh. Yeah, or things that are family heirlooms. And remember when we were talking about the core human drives? Value comparison, the reason we talked about that is because when it comes to value-based selling, the drives are what cause people to value something more highly than you can put a market price on. So if what you are offering helps people acquire more resources or acquire more power or acquire more influence or bond with people or meet people or learn things or defend what they have, the value goes up and up and up and up, depending on how strongly they perceive that what you're offering is going to help them get those things that they want.
The 4 pricing methods. Questions for reflection. What price are you currently asking for your offer? How are you supporting that price? Is it feasible to raise the price by supporting that price differently?
So a lot of pricing is, and the very next concept is taking this to its logical conclusion, value-based selling. Value-based selling is the process of understanding and reinforcing the reasons why your offer is valuable to purchase. So by really understanding the people that you're talking to, the prospects that have said, yes, I'm interested in this, please give me more information. Your job as a salesperson is to understand all of the reasons that what you're offering is valuable to the people that you're selling to.
The more of those reasons you understand, the more you can establish the value of what you're offering to the purchaser, the higher the price can go. So Tim, when you're selling services to a client, are your prices fixed?
No,
Why?
because it's more valuable to some people than others.
Right, and what defines when it's more valuable versus less valuable?
What they get out of it at the end.
Which was what?
So a lot of what we do is amplifying what somebody else has, or a good example is like, I can double your money. If you give me $1, that's not helping that much, but if you give me $50,000, that's helping you a lot. And so for some authors, what we do will help them just a little bit because they're starting with a little bit and they're only going to work a certain amount with what we give them. Where other authors, what we do for them will help them double their speaking fees, raise their consulting fees, sell a lot more books, sell 10,000 more copies of their book or something like that. So it's more valuable to them. If you can get an extra $10,000 or $20,000 per speaking gig, times that by 10 or 12 speaking gigs a year, plus the book sales, plus everything that goes along with that, all of a sudden what we're charging is a fraction of what you're going to get as a result.
Right.
So you can charge more and it's worth more. A really great example is this company building a skyscraper, and they were at the point where they had put in drywall through the entire skyscraper, so they're almost done. And this mold was showing up all over the drywall, so they're going to have to rip it out, spend millions and millions and millions of dollars. Couldn't figure out what was going on. They finally found a college professor, came in, looked at it, said it was like $100,000 or something ridiculous. If I can fix your problem, will you pay me this? And they're like, yeah. And he wrote down something they could buy at Home Depot and gave it to him and said, this will fix your problem. So for 30 minutes of his time, he made 6 figures, but was it worth it? Well, it saved the company millions of dollars. So it's that idea of never charge on your time, you charge on what the customer's getting out of what you give them. So I think this is where a lot of people that started entrepreneurial business get in trouble because they start pricing based on their time.
Yes.
But when you buy a coffee maker at Walmart, you don't think, well, how much time did they spend building this coffee maker and is it worth it? It's like, this coffee maker, it's worth $100 to me, so I'll pay it. And so it's the same thing, is that you have to charge based on what people are getting, the value they get out of it, and not just straight time or straight materials or time plus materials or anything like that.
Yes. How much is it ultimately worth to the person who's buying it? So there's a very useful rule of thumb in if you're selling an offer to particularly a business, it's much easier to calculate the value because you can say how much is it worth to the business or the business's operations if they purchase and use this thing that I'm offering. And the general rule of thumb that I typically start with is figure out in monetary terms, if you can, how much your offer is worth in value to the business times somewhere between 10 and 20%. Take, for example, let's say you are selling software to a large company. That software is going to help them manage their inventory in a particular way, and that is going to result in $10 million of cost savings to the company. The way I would start with value-based pricing is take 10 to 20% of that initial figure, and that's the base price that you start negotiating against. Now, it's also important when you are using value-based selling, the first part of the process is listening. It's not talking. It's asking your buyer a lot of questions. If you're the software designer, it pays for you to understand as much as possible about the company that you're selling the software to. Because if you can figure out that this software is worth $10 million to them, that puts you in a much better negotiating position when it comes to things like price. Value-based selling, a lot of people think of selling as this very high-pressure transactional, like I'm trying to push you to do something as quickly as possible. And the vast majority of sales processes that are effective, that are profitable, and that the customer walks away happy from are far more consultative in nature. You're listening, you're asking questions, you're helping the person on the other end of the negotiation understand that you know what they want, you have something that can help, they can trust that you're actually going to deliver what you promise, and when the transaction goes through, they're going to get something that's very, very valuable to them. And whatever they pay you is a small fraction of the value that they're going to get from the transaction. And as a result, they're going to agree to go ahead because it is clearly in their best interest to go ahead.
So a large part of the sales process is very consultative. It's just listening, understanding what the other party wants, helping them understand how you can help them get what they want, and helping them understand that whatever they pay you is just a small fraction of the value. And it's important to understand that there's a reason they're not doing this thing that's going to get them this benefit. They either don't know how, or they don't know the opportunity, or they have no idea what the process looks like, or they think it's too hard, or it's too expensive.
You just need somebody to pay them to tell them to do it.
Exactly, exactly. So if this opportunity exists, there's a reason that it's not happening yet.
You need to figure that out.
You need to figure that out, and if you can come in and help your prospect understand that you can help them bridge this gap that exists and you can get them this benefit, then that's how you make the sale. So Dan, would you mind telling your story about your value-based contract negotiation?
I was coming up on a contract renegotiation, so we sat down and I had never heard of the idea of value-based selling or value-based anything. It was just more like, well, just hour, and if I just work hard, and that'll work out, and that's not ever going to happen because you only have so much time. So even if working a 60-hour week, that's not where you make money. So I sat up with Josh, went through a whole bunch of stuff about what the contract was about, where we were going, how things were going to happen, what kind of nice stuff was happening for my clients. So my client, they were doubling and tripling their annual online income as a result of the work that I was doing. If I bring it back, they were paying a percentage point of maybe 3% to me as a result. So it was great value for them. And so all of a sudden it was like, oh no, that's bad. That's really bad business. I mean, I'm in trouble. So we spent some time, went over all of the value pieces, and then I went, and this is now what it will cost based on the value, entirely Josh, for that. And as a result, that contract went up $120,000 just in minutes as a result. And there was a lot more that they were able to do. It was good value, it was neat for my company, and we were able to bring some more people on and do some better work as a result, but it was a massive, massive win, and I don't think about sales in an hourly. I don't ever want to even talk about hourly with somebody if they want to. Like, hey, we're thinking about bringing in. How many hours is that going to be? And I'll be like, I don't know. Just like to say like that. About a month. I don't know.
Yeah, and how much did they hesitate when?
They didn't. That was the really fun part. I gave 3 options in that, and I gave an A, B, and a C, and I gave the Cadillac option. I honestly was going to be happy with whatever they chose. And they went with the high end because they said there's more value in this one.
And that works.
And that,
90% of the time.
Yes.
Yes.
ABC is always,
Yeah.
for me at least.
Because who wants to buy the cheapest thing in that situation?
Particularly when you're providing so much value. I mean, the outcome for this organization was millions of dollars of funds raised for their cause.
It's easily justifiable to go, we're going to go to that.
Yeah.
Because this little savings.
Yeah.
They recognized in your discussion too, how much you had made them over this previous period of time and how little it cost them.
Yeah, almost to the point that they were kind of shocked that I was still as low as I was, which is really terrible business. I mean, when you think about it, it's like, wow, my client's ready to pay me more. All I had to do was ask for it. But I think it's normal though. I mean, I think it's very normal because I had to sell myself. And so if you can get used to looking in the mirror and saying, this costs $250,000 and not blink. As an entrepreneur, that's a tough sale because you're going to make it to yourself first.
Yeah.
And I've quoted prices, you know, because people push and they say, well, what's it going to take for a couple of days worth of work? And I've said high figures. And the first sale's to yourself. I think that's always the case. And value-based selling is by far my most favorite thing now.
Now, and this is one of those things that the vast majority of business people, if they learn it through painful, hard-won experience by being grossly underpaid for the value that they're providing for a long period of time, until they finally recognize that they are providing a huge amount of value to the people that they're selling to, and psychologically they prepare themselves for asking for a fair percentage of the value that they're creating. And once that happens, it's a similar situation to Dan's story. The customers recognize the value, they know that it's worth it, and they end up paying it. You just have to ask, and you have to frame what you're asking in terms of the value that's being provided.
The other lesson I feel like I learned in that too is like, if I double my prices and half of the people walk away, I'm making the same amount of money doing half the work.
Yes.
You want to drive off certain customers and you want to drive off a certain number of customers. And so you hear things 2,800 times and then you finally realize what they mean. And that was when I finally got to raising the prices, and how important it was that if I can raise my prices And even if it drives off people, if I keep half of them, I work half and make the same amount of money. That's not a bad gig.
And if you only have a certain amount of capacity every day to work, and who doesn't, right? If you only have a certain amount of time, you want to work for the people who value what you have to offer the most. And either you work less making the same amount of money, or you have more capacity to do even more great work for people who similarly value what you have. So Tim, if someone wanted to pay you $10 an hour to put up a WordPress website for them, that's not worth your time. And they're not a good customer because they're not going to get the value that a best-selling author who may sell 10,000 more books and negotiate a $500,000 or $1 million advance next time will get from your work.
We have two prices. We have full price and free. And we always have one free project at a time we're working on. We're for like a nonprofit or something like that. Because anything in between, if somebody pays you $50, they have paid you and they feel like they should get your best work. And it's kind of true, but there's always tension. So I never discount. I never discount. You can pay full price, or you can usually just not get it. But those are the only two prices, because when you do something for free, people appreciate it. If you're like, hey, I can't work on it this month, we're behind on other projects, they're fine. But if they write you a check for $50, they expect your best. And so I'd rather than write a bigger check so I can give them my best. I've seen other people, I feel like, do a decent job with discounting, but every time I discount, one of us ends up angry.
Yeah, and
it's usually just me and myself, you know?
Right. And you bring up a really good point. How does discounting mesh with value-based selling? It doesn't at all. Now, what if you're in a negotiation or in a sales process with a prospect and they just say, we don't have this much money, but you still think they're going to be a good prospect in some dimensions. You still think the sale would be valuable. They just can't afford your Cadillac option.
And you go to Volkswagen.
Yeah, and what does that look like? If you're following value-based selling, what does that look like? Is it doing the same thing and charging less?
No, you want to bundle it.
You're doing less and charging less.
You're doing less and charging less. So you do have some flexibility in what you offer still in value-based selling. The question becomes, if this is not a price that you can afford or sustain, you can lower the price, but the value that you're providing always goes down in turn.
Well, that's why if you do an ABC, you've got to make sure that A is the low-priced option.
Yep.
That there's an intrinsic, very important intrinsic value in the A, and then as you get to the B and the C, there's value add.
Yes.
And that, because basically what's going to happen, because the whole psychology obviously is for them to go to the C and get all really the Cadillac for just a little bit more. You still want to make sure you don't want to ever have to backtrack with a client and, well, you know, we can do A, but it's got to have essentially the same result.
Yes.
It's going to have results that are important.
All of your packages should have intrinsic value in what they provide to. So even your lowest package should be a screaming deal when it comes to the value that you're providing to the folks who have it. Now, the more you provide, the higher the value of that offer and the more you should charge for it.
Say you're a restaurant, they're selling you $30 steaks. That's only just kind of $5 burger there as well, right?
Yes. That actually brings this into qualification. So if you're a restaurant that's regularly selling $30 steaks, the customer that walks in and orders a $5 sandwich is taking up a table from a customer who would probably order a $30 steak. So you can qualify your customers by choosing the offers that you extend. An idea that will actually make it easier to think about some things like this is next best alternative. So value-based selling relies on you providing something unique that doesn't exist elsewhere in the market, right? If what you're providing is exactly the same as somebody else is providing, and the other person is charging a lower price, your customers have an alternative, right? They can choose to say no to you and go to their next best alternative, which is purchasing the same thing from somebody else. So the more similar what you're offering is to other providers in the marketplace, the more you're going to find yourself in a situation where market-based pricing is a very strong force. You may not be able to raise your prices very much. If you're doing something unique, so art is a great example. The pieces that an artist has are absolutely unique. They don't exist anywhere else. Now, depending on the business practice, if they're selling originals, they're truly unique. There is only one. There may be duplicates, which we'll get into multiplication and duplication here in a minute. It depends on how unique your offer really truly is.
Value-based selling. Questions for reflection. Why is this purchase in the prospect's best interest? If your prospective customer purchases your offer, how will they benefit? How can you frame your offer's price as a small fraction of the value they'll receive? Education-based selling. Questions for reflection. What are you doing to make your prospects smarter, more informed customers? How can you make your prospects more knowledgeable in a way that helps them understand the benefits of your offer?